everyone, and welcome to today's digital event brought to you by the Content Marketing Institute and our friends from Alchemer. Please welcome everybody, our speakers today. We have Jove Oakley, who is the CFO, and Bo Bandy, who is the CMO of Alchemer. They've got a great presentation, some really great practical tips and advice for you today. So welcome everyone. How are you?
Hi, Stephanie. Great. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So great to have you. I'm going to turn it over to you, and I'll see you in a little bit for some Q&A.
Awesome. Sounds great. Joe, before we get started, maybe let's take a second and introduce ourselves, because I know this is our first CMI webinar, so probably we're new to some of the attendees today. Tell us who you are.
Yeah, so it's really nice to meet everybody virtually. My name is Jove Oakley. I'm the CFO at Alchemer. A little bit about myself. I have been in the CX world for the last 6 years here at Alchemer. As you might expect, my background is in finance and accounting. I've spent the last 25 years inside corporations in the finance organizations of technology businesses and services businesses.
Awesome. I'm Bo Bandy. I'm the CMO here at Alchemer. My background's all in B2B tech companies, but lots of different roles within marketing. So I've been a product marketer, I've been a demand gen manager, I was a content marketer, and I think what that means is over the course of my career, I've had to fight for budget for lots of different projects, marketing campaigns, etc. Almost 2 years ago, when I came to Alchemer, one of the things I was so pleased to find is that Jove is a really marketing savvy CFO, probably the most marketing savvy CFO that I've had the opportunity to work with. And so we spend a lot of time having these really great discussions, and it kind of made me realize that not only am I really lucky, but this is probably a conversation that other CMOs would like to be having with their CFOs. And so I have started putting Jove in the hot seat on webinars like this one, so that we can kind of pick his brain and share the things that are kind of helping us be successful and may help you win budgets with your CFOs. Today we're going to talk about what are the metrics your CFO cares about, how marketing can drive an impact that again the CFO is going to care about, how to build a finance-friendly business case, and then we are more than happy to take questions. I will say Jove and I, because we talk about this all the time, this is going to have a really conversational format. So please don't wait to the end to ask your questions. If there's something we're talking about and hitting on and you want to hear more of, please ask a question, and we will try to maybe cover it in real time. Before we jump into that, I think one thing that'll help us kind of shape our conversation is to learn more about all of you that are joining today. So tell us, what is the greatest challenge you face when working with your CFO or finance team? We've got A, not aligned on what metrics matter. I have ideas on what this could be for people. B, ability to prove results of marketing programs, so maybe that's tough for you. C, disagreement on budget expectations. And then D, unreasonable expectations around forecasting. So we'll give you a second. Love to hear kind of what the greatest challenge is for you, and we'll keep that in mind as we go. I mean, I've definitely, Joe, I know you and I have even kind of debated on the first one on like what metrics really matter, right? And yeah. We see eye to eye, but I've certainly been places where, marketing teams are trying to win budget on email opens, for example, and that, I don't know, is that a metric that matters to the CFO?
Yeah, I think this is always a interesting conversation. I think the process of alignment is really important. So I'm curious what the attendees view as their biggest challenges within their businesses.
For sure. We've still got responses coming in, so I'm going to give it a couple more seconds. I think alignment on metrics, I expect will be a popular one. I also think that last one of unreasonable expectations, right? Like I've definitely been places where, okay, here's your goal, and there's not a lot of, again, to your point, alignment around if that's reasonable or not. And that can make things really challenging.
Yeah, I think ability to prove results is always a big question that CFOs are asking marketing teams. So what did this drive? How can you show me the results? How
Yeah,
are we doing
sure.
this?
All right, let's take a look and see how our audience did. Okay, so
That's great.
pretty evenly split among the bottom three, but man, ability to prove results of marketing programs is definitely the leader here. So I'm excited to hear that because I think we've got some suggestions on how to help folks do that. Let's start with the metrics that matter. Why don't you take us through this section, Jove, and tell us as a CFO what really matters to you?
Yeah, definitely. And before I kind of jump into the metrics, I thought I would spend just a second and kind of describe how I view what my job is. And I think this is why when I go to CFO conferences or I talk to peers, I think most CFOs view their job as the following. And really what I spend my day figuring out is how to deploy capital, right? So how do I drive revenue and improve profit? And how do I deploy our available capital to achieve those goals? And really, when I'm evaluating what's going on with a business, I tend to put things in two buckets. I put things in a bucket of revenue generating, and I put things in a bucket of overhead when I'm looking at those things. And they're both very important. They work hand in hand. But when I look to drive performance out of things that I put in the overhead bucket, I'm thinking about how do I reduce cost and deliver the same service level at a lower cost. When I look at things that I put in the revenue generation bucket is how can I deploy more capital to revenue generating activities efficiently to improve the top line? And I actually think the goal is always, if I was in the marketing department or some other department, my goal is to get my projects into that revenue generating book, because the conversation that you're going to have with your finance counterparts are about how do we deliver more top line, how do we get more efficient, how do we do more, and I'm always looking to deploy capital into those programs. If you land in the overhead bucket, what I'm trying to figure out is how do I reduce the cost of this initiative so that I can take that money and give it to a revenue generating project. So I think a lot of the game is getting your projects viewed through the lens of revenue generation. So I will jump into the metrics. And I will, there's some questions coming in. I'll try to answer these in a second as we get a couple at the end of my section. So first off, I think if you start to think about your program as revenue generating, what we're really focusing on is some of the key metrics that your CFO or your finance department might be focused on. And there's ultimate goals like how much revenue do we ultimately generate as a company, but there's a lot of touch points along the way. And I think the metrics that we've highlighted today are components of ultimate corporate goals. So one of the first things that I think is really important to understand from your projects are customer lifetime value. So it's a really simple concept, which is what's your average value of a customer over some frequency, and how long do they stay, and multiplying those things together gives you the value of a customer. This is a really key component of how you approach your CX programs, because too often people are trying to measure in-year or in-period results against a cost basis. But I really want to understand my investment against the ultimate value of that customer. Customers stay around for a very long time, and we should be willing to invest at higher multiples based on that life. A little quick tip to understand your customer life. If you understand what your customer churn rate is on an account basis, and you don't know what your customer life is, if you just take 1 divided by your churn, that equals your average customer life. And a lot of people don't think that math works, but it really does. So if you don't know what your customer life is, that's the easiest way to figure out your customer life to measure against your average revenue per user.
Awesome, great tip. And I think, Jove, maybe one question that I'll ask is, do you think about customer lifetime value as one big category, or do you ever think about it in segments, right? That not all customers are the same.
Yeah, I think sometimes it makes sense to aggregate things to simplify the analysis, but often you're looking at cohorts of customers. So I think good programs are designed to impact specific demographics or specific cohorts within your customer base. And you can generate those metrics for those specific cohorts. And I was going to say, Karen Oakland asked a question, how do you get CFOs to recognize that marketing is a long-term investment across multiple tactics and do not, and to do top-down plan based on goals versus bottom-up based on discrete tactics. So that is a challenge. I'm always asking Bo, like, why did this one thing work and this other thing didn't? I think part of that trick is to establish overall metrics long-term. So as a company, are we trying to drive, more lifetime value of a customer? We're getting to some of these metrics coming up. So establish a long-term metric that is going to be a result of the portfolio of the activities that you have, and then understand the subcomponents that maybe you're trying to accomplish from each of your different tactics. A lot of this is like we talk a lot here about top of the funnel, bottom of the funnel, and it's often hard to describe that portfolio effect. So if you establish separate metrics for each of these programs that may not be just, how much revenue do they generate, but maybe it's how many extra touches did we get from these top of the funnel metrics that ultimately impact results, and define success based on a subset of different metrics. I think all CFOs want to metric everything, and they want to understand every component of your programmatic spend. So establish benchmarks for each of those that are unique that you can succeed around. They're not all just the net result. They impact different pieces of the business. And so sort of going on to the next key metric that we talk about a lot is customer acquisition cost. So first metric is how much is a customer worth over the life? And then how much does it cost me to acquire that customer? And I would say these are really good basic definitions. Your company and your finance team may have very specific nuanced adjustments to these definitions. So if you go talk to your team, you can always get exactly how they define these things. If they don't know, these are really good places to start in terms of doing your own calculations. So CAC, you can see it on the slide, is basically how much am I spending in aggregate to acquire a customer over some period, divided by how many customers am I actually acquiring. There's often a time difference, like you may be looking at the spending from the prior quarter over the customers acquired in the new quarter. So you can adjust the time periods to reflect the nature of your business. And this is really a baseline of how you figure out the cost of acquisition that almost everybody uses. So moving on, and then we'll get to some questions. Customer churn rate. These are, customer churn rate and customer retention rate are, hand in glove. They're basically the inverse of each other. But if you want to look at churn, you can do it on a count basis or a dollar basis, depending how your business is oriented, and it would be the same math. So you look at the either dollars or number of customers lost in a given period over the beginning number of customers you had, turn that into a percentage, and that is your churn rate. If you take 1 divided by that churn rate, that is your life of your customer. If you take 1 minus that value, that is your retention rate. This is a core metric that programs are often designed to influence. So understanding your baseline in terms of either churn or customer retention, and then measuring how you impact that over time, really is a good way to start to think about baselining your programs. And I'm going to jump through this next metric. I think that's it. And then I'm going to jump to some questions if that works, Bo.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. So the other last metric that we talk a lot about is average revenue per customer, or ARPU, or average revenue per account. Again, this is a really simple metric. What is the revenue I'm generating in a given period divided by the total number of customers I have? This gives you the value that you can apply to your lifetime value calculation. And then you can get significantly more complicated in terms of your metrics from here. A great compound metric that's not listed on these slides is a lifetime value to cost of acquisition. So you start to take your lifetime value calculation that we've outlined here, and then you divide that by your cost of acquisition, and you can get a multiple that tells you the rate of investment that it takes to go acquire customers. So I'm going to try to swing back through. It looks like there's a number of questions here.
Joe,
And
let's start with Tyler's question, because I think you and I are going to answer it differently, and I think that's always interesting for folks.
All right.
So, is it a best practice to collect from finance the total cost of sales and marketing? It's easy to calculate digital costs, but you need staff salaries, etc.
Yeah. So when I'm looking at a customer acquisition cost metric, I'm usually doing some loading of that. Including the cost of the sort of the sunk cost or the fixed cost of the people that are doing it. So back to Bo's point, like if I'm calculating an average aggregate metric, it'll be all in, including those costs. Now, if I'm measuring a specific program, like a subcomponent of the larger programmatic spend, I may look at that at a very discrete level and not burden it fully. So it just depends on at what level I'm trying to measure that metric at.
We're same and different. Before I give my answer, I'm going to clarify one thing, because you use the word programmatic, which in advertising actually means something a little bit different. So when Jove says programmatic, he really just means my budget that's allocated to marketing campaigns and programs.
Yes.
So it's a nuance, and it's, I think, a perfect example of how CFOs and CMOs speak a little bit differently. So I agree with the second half of your statement, Jove. I think one of the challenges, and we're going to talk about this in the next section, that I've faced as a CMO is I want to measure cost of acquisition, or I want to measure ARPU, but it's so hard, and depending on the organization you're at, it can be nearly impossible to gather all of that information and data that you need from finance and other teams in a relatively short time period to then measure these things and report out on it. And the level of effort that I've at places where I've tried to do that has been, again, sometimes impossible. And so I actually would argue, and again, it's going to depend on your org, don't even spend time trying to calculate a fully loaded metric, right, with staff counts and all those other things, technology, et cetera, because it gets to be too complicated. And the easier thing is to just pick a program, measure it, be really transparent that it's not a fully loaded cost of the program, but it at least lets you understand and start the conversation with the CFO on, was this a good investment or not? And I think that ends up being a lot easier, and something truthfully marketing can do on their own. So we're the same but different, Jove.
Yes.
Let's do another poll, because I'm curious about some of the other challenges the audience is facing. This one clearly lines up with what we heard on the last poll, right? Where folks said, hey, it's really hard to measure. So what are the greatest challenges you're facing when it comes to measurement and analytics? Is it insufficient tracking on marketing campaigns, lacking customer insights and sentiment, inability to access customer data, or is it a lack of clarity on the metrics that finance needs? What are you guessing is the top answer on this one, Jove?
I think it's going to be A, insufficient tracking. I think people struggle with that often.
Yeah. I might go with C, inability to access customer data. I think, again, to my comment, right, like the times I've tried to go and really calculate some of these things, again, not so much at Alchemer, but at other places, it's been really hard for me to get some of these metrics out of finance. And so, really getting a lifetime value number that we all agree on, those sorts of things. So I'm going to go C.
Okay.
We've got some more responses coming in. Let me give it one more second, and then we'll find out. All right, they're slowing down. Let's see what folks are struggling with when it comes to measurement. Oh, okay. So I don't know. I don't think either of us get a taco lunch on that one. Dead even between insufficient tracking and an inability to access customer data. So I think you and I are pretty clued in apparently on the challenges.
Yeah.
Let's jump to the next section. And I know we've got more questions coming in. Some of these might get answered in this next section. If not, we'll certainly try to get to as many as we can. So I want to talk a little bit about what we've been doing at Alchemer to kind of measure some of our programs, knowing like, hey, those are the metrics that are really important to Jove and the finance team, but that it's really hard to measure them at that level. What are some of the things we've been doing and how do we tie them back up? So let's start with customer acquisition costs. So like every marketing organization out there, we are trying to bring in new business. One of the ways we do that is running programs with third-party review sites like G2, Capterra, Trust Radius, right? These sites have a really great high-value audience because it's folks that are actively shopping and looking. We've found that those sites have a tendency to be a really good source of referral and direct traffic. So even if they don't engage on that site, we see them showing up on our site. Review sites like these, and then also in the B2C space, right? Like Google Business Reviews, Yelp pages, WebMD, like all these places where consumers leave reviews, plus on the B2B side with G2, et cetera. These are becoming really good drivers for GEO results. And so getting in those AI search results. And then they've got good programs, right, to deliver intent and targeted leads. So that kind of last bullet, we've been spending, some money to bring leads from those sites into our database to nurture and convert. But we were not happy with the cost of acquisition on those. So again, we're looking at one program, thinking about the cost of acquisition on that and how could we improve it. So knowing our goal, right, we want to increase the number and frequency of the reviews. And we didn't want to add any time or money and wanted to get a lower cost of acquisition. So what we did is we run a regular always on NPS survey. We'll talk more about NPS in a few minutes, but what we did is we said, hey, everyone that responds positively to that survey, giving us a 9 or a 10 on it, we are going to turn around and automatically ask them 24 hours later, 24 hours after they completed the survey, to come and write a review on, I think at the time we were focused on G2. So we started this program to, again, drive more reviews, to get some of those other benefits and increase ultimately the number of MQLs we got through those sites. So leading up, we turned this on in June. Leading up to that, the first 6 months of the year, on average, we were seeing 4 new reviews a month. We were spending just over 9K and really only getting 1 to 2 MQLs a month out of it, which is not a great cost of acquisition for us. So we shifted, we launched this program in the 6 months that, well, I guess not quite 6 months, the months that have followed, we've seen our reviews double. We actually dropped our investment a little bit so we could go fund some other programs, but we also have seen the number of MQLs double. So that has cut our cost of acquisition in half. So what this has done for us is now I can say, like, look, we're measuring cost of acquisition here. We understand the return it's driving. We ran this test to see if we could reduce the cost of acquisition. And now I can take this to Jove and say, look, here's what we've got going on here. We should either, now that we have a better program, put more dollars in here because we've brought the cost of acquisition down. Or, hey, I'm shifting investment away from this and into these other programs. So my team can use this type of analysis to come back to Jove. I know cost of acquisition matters to him, and really have a different type of conversation with him versus like probably, a year ago, we might have just said, no, we know it works. And so it's really kind of changes the level of conversation.
Yeah, I think both, I can interject for a second. Like what makes this a successful project for me is it had a defined hypothesis. It had a pre-measurement period. So there was some measurement of results prior to implementing it. There was an action plan that was also measurable. And then there was a output of results. And so those give me a lot of confidence around how we're going to go approach a problem.
Yeah.
And Joy asked a question which is like, hey, I'll paraphrase it, but it's like, good luck getting your CFO to approve tools you need to go get all that data in the first place. And I think the biggest way you do that is if you can lay out a hypothesis, if you can highlight a plan or a problem that you're facing in terms of attacking a real business problem, and then you can highlight the initial investment you need and how you're going to report back on that. I think that's how you can float to the top of the 1,000 tool and system requests that your finance team is getting, just to like help the team and be more efficient. Like really tie it to a program and a specifically defined outcome.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a good call out, Jove, because I think maybe what I'll say is what happened in the background here is we ran this lead program with G2 and Capterra. Those programs direct people directly to our landing page. So we have a dedicated landing page for it and a dedicated form. So I'm only attributing the things that came through that form to these programs. And that's the extent of my sophisticated tracking on this, right? So I'm not accounting for the increase in traffic we saw here. I'm not accounting for anything that might be an improvement in the review sites. Those things in this instance are just gravy, and we're not measuring that. We just are taking that as added benefit. So our level of sophistication here is pretty low, but it's just enough to be able to tell this story and to see, is it working, is it not working, and should we invest more? All right, I got a couple more examples I want to roll through. I know one of these is going to answer some questions, so excited to get to it. We talked earlier, Jove, you shared one of the metrics that matter is sort of ARPU, or average revenue per user or account. One of the things that drives ARPU up is the ability to cross-sell products into accounts. And so they are buying essentially more from you, and therefore the revenue per account goes up. We launched a product called Alchemer Pulse. We know that if we can get our customers to buy it, yes, it increases their revenue, number one goal. We know that it's certainly faster and cheaper to sell products to existing customers than new customers. We also know that in marketing cross-sell products, it changes our customers' perception of us. And so they recognize that something new is innovation, and all customers want to see that. So as we think about, okay, how are we going to successfully cross-sell customers to another product to help with ARPU? Here's kind of how we approached it. So again, our goal, increase the number of customers who were buying that product. Our targeting was not all that sophisticated. Again, like in terms of needing tool investment, we just said, like, look, here's our customer base that doesn't already have it. Let's go use webinars, content, email, et cetera, to educate them on the value of the product, et cetera, right? Like very straightforward product marketing stuff. But by putting the energy into it and measuring it, we can show some return on that, right? So in the period before the campaign, we had 15 customers that had purchased. Roughly the same time period, once we launched that campaign, we saw the number of customers purchasing double. And so that also led to an increase in product revenue from these accounts of 31%. Having this data like this and being able to take it to Jove gives me the ability to say, look, we're onto something here. We have early indicators with really limited investment that we can be successful. Now what we want to do is go fund more programs into this segment of customers to increase this. So again, it's not super sophisticated. It's really more about how we're presenting the information to him and showing him, here's what we did and here's a result that opens that door to having, a budget increase conversation. Jove, anything you want to add here?
No, I think let's keep trucking and get to the Q&A.
Okay.
I'm sure I could talk for another 15 minutes, but.
Awesome. There's quite a few questions coming in on Net Promoter Surveys. So I'm glad I included this example. So, I mean, if you don't know Alchemer, we're in the business of Net Promoter Surveys, right? Our software helps companies collect feedback from their customers through surveys on their products and websites, through capturing reviews, all these different things. So we talk a lot about NPS and NPS programs. They are a great way to help you identify if a customer might be at risk of churning. There are other ways to do that, though, right? You can look at product usage. You can just look at general engagement of that customer. Do they have a lot of support tickets, right? There's other indicators. But we like NPS. I think as a marketer, it's a really easy way for me to get at this kind of data. So NPS survey, if you're not familiar, essentially breaks the respondents into 3 categories. You have promoters that have given you a 9 or a 10, you have detractors, and you have passive, which are the folks kind of in the sweet spot of like 5 to 8. Jove's team has done a ton of analysis and said, hey, look, the customers in that passive bucket are actually the most at risk to churn. I kind of will summarize by saying they're just pretty apathetic, right? They don't love you and they don't hate you. They're just like meh in the middle. What we found is the customers that are detractors, that are really upset, are actually typically really passionate customers that probably historically have really liked you, but they're upset about something in that time period usually. And they're still highly engaged. You still have an opportunity to kind of resolve and change their sentiment. It's those passives that aren't engaging and are just, again, meh, that are the most at risk. So we kind of set out to start a program. This is relatively new, so I don't actually have results. I'm just going to talk to you about how we're approaching it and some early indicators. So we have launched programs in conjunction with our customer success team to increase the education and sort of value awareness, if you will, around the product, with the goal of helping them to understand how to get more out of it. So that might be webinars around different use cases. So if you're a marketer, did you know there's these 12 other ways that you could be using the product, not just for a survey? If you're in product management, hey, did you know you can use the platform to do this and this? So spending a lot of time creating content and webinars to help this audience see where they can get more value. We are measuring this by really taking that segment of passive customers. Again, we're targeting them with all this marketing, and we're measuring that group to see when they take the survey again, how did they shift? Did they shift up? Hopefully. I mean, even if they shifted down, that might not be the end of the world, because now at least they're engaging and we can get a better pulse on it. But we're really measuring that short term, where do they move on the NPS scale? And long term, our goal is to measure the retention of this group. So as we've educated them, do we see them shifting, and what does that look like? Lots of questions. I know we're right at time. I'm gonna breeze through these, and hopefully if you have questions we haven't gotten to, we can follow up with you offline. You all have this deck. I think hopefully the examples we've shared are helpful, but I think in this last section, we've really kind of outlined the things that help you build a successful business case with your finance team. Making sure, again, you've got the alignment, what the finance team values and what matters, and how to speak to those things. I'll reiterate number 6, getting specific. I think bringing it down a few levels and being able to change the way you speak about specific campaigns with those details really makes a difference in getting finances buy-in. I think also being able to clearly and simply articulate what you're trying to do, right? So Jove talked about this earlier of, we kind of set out with a hypothesis, we tell him what we want to do, how we're going to measure it, and then eventually the results. Highly recommend this formula of we propose to do X in order to win more revenue, whatever that might be. Here's the benefit and this is the cost. And as specific as you can be in those brackets, the better off you are. We've included a few other slides here, but I think maybe I'll just jump to our last one in that I'm sure most all of you are in preparation for 26 budget planning. Here's our tips for how to tackle that. With that, Jove, you've been watching chat come there, the questions come in. Yeah. Do you want to maybe pick one for us to end on?
Yeah, I maybe I'll try to answer a bunch of them like in aggregate, which is, the themes are like, how do I figure out what to measure? How do I get people to respond? And how do I get funding for those things in a really complex, landscape where everybody is asking for money? And I think what Bo highlighted is, find your finance friends, understand what matters to the business, understand how to bring your asks forward in the context of the things that matter to the business, make them well structured so that everyone understands what you're going to spend, what the interim measurements of success are, and what your ultimate goal is. You don't have to accomplish everything in a single year. You can have long-term goals as long as you have milestones, and then be really transparent about how you report back on those things and how you move the goals and adjust your initiatives along those paths and communicate that. And I think if you need tools and you need things and you need resources to get to the base data as a precursor to that, I think if you have that big programmatic view, those asks get a lot easier because they become piece of something very relevant to the business versus just an ask for another thing into a overall budget. So that's how I evaluate everything, and that's how a lot of the people in my role evaluate everything. And I think those are the best ways you can become successful in achieving your outcomes.
Awesome. I love that. And again, I know we're right at time. And Stephanie, thanks for being patient. I know we've gone over, but so many great questions. And we'll make sure we follow up and get answers to folks that we didn't get to.
Absolutely. We'll share those questions, folks. If we didn't get your question answered, no worries at all. We will after this. And also, please, before you go, if you did not download the Marketing Leader's Guide to the CFO that's in the resources section, just click on the paperclip. Please make sure you do that before you go. It's ungated. It's a great asset to take along with you, as well as a copy of these slides that have so many great tips on them. So thank you both so much. This has been so informative. Really appreciate the guidance, the best practices, the tips, everything. And thank you to the audience for your questions along the way. Have a great afternoon, everyone.